Good evening. Welcome to this webinar. It's part of the series, the IHR Clinics, where we are discussing the highlights of IHR, but particularly discussing and orienting our member states on the 2024 amendments of the International Health Regulations. Without further ado, because we want to keep time, I want to request Ms. Pearl Kowienje to take us through the housekeeping and later on go on and provide the objectives of the sessions. And thereafter, we shall have the introduction of our panelists. Over to you, Pearl.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the call, on the webinar. And thank you for joining the third session on IHR amendments. We'll start off with the WHO Code of Conduct. WHO is committed to enabling events at which everyone can participate in an inclusive, respectful, and safe environment. WHO events are guided by the highest ethical and professional standards, and all participants are expected to behave with integrity and respect towards all participants attending or involved in any WHO event. We therefore strongly encourage everyone to familiarize themselves with the Code of Conduct, which outlines the expected behaviors and how to report misconduct. Next slide, please. So a few housekeeping remarks for us all on the webinar to ensure that it goes through smoothly. Firstly, interpretation is available in English, Portuguese, and French. Please click on the interpretation globe icon in your Zoom toolbar to select your preferred language. If you have any questions related to the presentations, please use the Q&A feature and not the chat feature. For general comments, introductions, or IT-related issues, please use the chat function or the chat feature. And if you'd like to take the floor, kindly raise your hand using the raise hand feature, and our moderator will call upon you. On some devices, depending on whether you have updated your Zoom or not, the raise hand feature may be under the react button. You click on the react button and the raise hand feature will appear. So just to practice, may a few people please react with their thumbs up if they have managed to locate the raise hand feature. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Additional housekeeping remarks. Please note that this webinar is recorded. By participating, you're giving consent for your contributions to be captured and shared for learning purposes. All session materials, including recordings, will be shared with the participants in the days following the webinar. Next slide, please. Please be assured that your individual data will be kept confidential. Any aggregated data may be used for reporting, to generate maps, communication products, and to inform any new future initiatives. Next slide, please. The objectives of this third session are to, 1, update national authorities, including national IHR focal points, WHO country offices, and other stakeholders on the IHR amendments adopted in 2024. Secondly, it is to provide guidance to state parties on the implications of the IHR 2024 amendments in anticipation of its entry into force on 19 September 2025. Next slide, please. So this is the agenda that we have for you today. We'll start off with brief welcoming remarks from WHO AFRO, which will be followed by 2 main presentations on the proposed amendments to the IHR, and the second presentation will be on the provisions related to solidarity and equity. Each presentation will be followed by a Q&A session, and this will be finally concluded with a summary of the next steps and closing. Over to you, Dr. Allen, to introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you very much for those objectives. And hopefully by the end of the 2 hours, we would have achieved those objectives. Like Paul mentioned, we have 2 major huge sessions, but before that, we have opening remarks. The opening remarks will be given by Dr. Dick Chamler. Dr. Dick Chamler is the program area manager for the emergency preparedness program at the Regional Office for Africa, WHO. And he's also currently the hub coordinator for the Nairobi Emergency Hub. We shall have a session on overview of IHR amendments, and this will be given by Dr. Mary Stephen. Dr. Mary Stephen is currently the current WR, World Health Representative in Eritrea, Asmara, and she will briefly tell us about the key amendments and talk about the pandemic emergency Article 1 to 4, in addition to highlighting Articles 1 to 12. Then we shall have our colleagues from AFRO, Dr. Hamid Majoub, who will take us through another good session also, commitment, solidarity, and equity amendments, including articles related to the annexes. Most of you are familiar with the annexes of the most recently concluded process. And thereafter, we shall have the next steps as part of the closing process. Without any further ado, let me welcome Dr. Dick Chamler, who is our program area manager for emergency preparedness, to take us through the opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Dick.
Hello, merci beaucoup. Okay, bonjour, bon dia, good morning, all of you in the call, and welcome again to our IHR clinics. And we appreciate we have over 100 people now already online, and it is the testimony of how critical international health regulation framework is to Africa. As you're all aware, IHR amendments are not new. There had been a number of amendments in the past decades. Oftentimes, amendments are preceded by the public health events in which had an impact as in terms of health, economy, or other issues. I think you all remember IHR 205, and it's originated at the time of the outbreak of SARS in Southeast Asia. And now we are amending the 205 IHR as a result of the pandemic of COVID, in which you know all as its impact. In our clinic today, you will hear all the key amendments in which were agreed upon by our member states. And I'll take this opportunity to appreciate the efforts of our Africa Group plus Egypt and the member states as a whole for ensuring issues like equity are also included in this amendment. In the clinic today, we have brought all the experts in which have taken part in supporting our member states in the amendment process in the past 2.5 years ago, and it includes experts from HQ, from the regional office, and the country office. So in Africa, as you all understand, there had been the roadmap from the amendment adoption to the entry into force, in which is expected to take place in next month. And I'm glad to report to you that all our African member states haven't expressed any of the rejections of the amendments. However, we have one country in Africa in which have requested us to defer the entry into force in line with IHR Article 59.3. So they have up to 12 months in which the country is to be able to let us know if they are endorsing the amendment to enter into force or not. Therefore, we are grateful of that. His expression, our African member states recognize the importance of this actually IHR amendment. Among the amendments is the issue which has elicited a lot of the discussions in the region, and also the request for clarifications in which we have received here in the Regional Office for Africa. And it's the issue of the National IHR Authority, in which, as you know, all our member states as IHR NFPs. So the countries really need to know of what is the National IHR Authority, and where this role it will be housed. And there are a number of countries which have expressed clear interest to designate the National Public Health Agencies as one of the institutions in which it will be housing this National IHR Authority. In this clinic, you hear experts in which they will say clearly on how this NMA it will be implemented. And they'll be here to listen on your opinion on how we think the regional, our regional office will be able to support you. So, as you have heard from the moderator, he needed me to be brief remarks. Therefore, we'll end up here, and I'm wishing you all the best in your deliberations on the IHR clinic. It is necessary to say. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Dick. And thank you for the great work you're doing for this area of work. It hasn't been that easy, but we really appreciate your technical support and guidance. Without any further ado, I will call on to the next presenter, who is Dr. Mary Stephen. Like I said earlier, Dr. Mary Stephen is currently the WR of Eritrea, based in Asmara. She has also been part and parcel of this process and has done a lot of work around IHR. And she's going to take us through a 30 minutes presentation focusing on the key amendments. She will explain the National IHR Authority and the pandemic emergency, among others. Welcome, Dr. Mary, and over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Alan, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy to join you on this webinar. So like Dr. Alan said, I'm going to be taking the first part of the presentation, and then we will take some questions and answers, and colleagues in AFRO will take us to the second part of the presentation. Dr. Alan, can you see my screen on slideshow?
Yes, you can begin, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Dr. Dick rightly said, this webinar started about 2 weeks ago. And last week,
They don't seem to be in slide mode, though.
Not slide mode. Okay.
They are on slide mode.
Okay, maybe it's from Dr. Mio. Can I have one more person to confirm whether they see presentation mode or not?
Yes, presentation mode.
Dr. Miriam, yeah, the challenge is from your side. Okay, thank you so much. So last week, we had colleagues that took us through the overview of the IHR and the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework, and then the function of the IHR national focal point. So today we are going to go a little bit further into the specific amendments from the 2024 amendment, but just as a quick refresher, we all know what the IHR is. It's legally binding instruments. We have 196 member states, of course, state parties, 194 member states. And the IHR, mainly the goal is to prevent international spread of diseases. As we heard from last week, We started from the International Sanitary Regulation in 1951. Then we had the major revision in 1969, that which changed the nomenclature from IHR to International Health Regulations. And then we had major amendment in 2005. Dr. Dick has just explained what happened that preceded this amendment. So I will just move forward. This is just a little refresher in case someone is just joining today. So in between, we had some minor amendments as well. So the 2024 amendment, actually the journey started in 2020 following the COVID-19 pandemic. If you remember, the WHO of 2020, COVID started in January 2020, and then in May we had the WHO. And the WHO called upon WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros, to convene an independent review of the COVID-19 response. So this led to establishment of some independent panels. The first panel is the Independent Panel on Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness and Response. Then we had the IHR Review Committee on the functioning of the international health regulations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we had the Independent Oversight Committee, which is a committee that already existed for the WHO Health Emergencies Program. And there are other reviews that took place as well. And from these reviews and others, there were over 300 recommendations that came up. And so at the working group on strengthening WHO preparedness and response, this is called the WGPR, Working Group on Strengthening WHO Preparedness and Response, was established. So this working group was expected to look at all these recommendations to see whether we can use existing instruments to implement those recommendations or whether we need additional instruments. So they did their work. They grouped these recommendations into 4: leadership and governance, systems and tools, financing, and then there was the last group on equity. As you just heard from Dr. Dick, it was pushed specifically by the Africa group, supported by other developing countries. So the working group was also expected to look at the benefit of developing a pandemic instrument. So upon completion of their work, the WHO special session in 2021 was convened. This was the second ever special session to decide on whether or not there is need to develop the pandemic instrument. And when that decision was made, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body was established for the development of the pandemic instruments. And then in the WHO 2022, while the work on the pandemic instrument was ongoing, the United States submitted a proposal for amendment. And following that, Article 59 of the IHR was actually amended. This is the article that talks about the timeline for coming into entry into force of any subsequent amendments. So this was what happened around 2022. And then the member state decided that, okay, because there were lots of other member states that wanted to submit proposals for amendment, that it should be done just holistically. And as a result, they agreed that, okay, the amendment of the IHR 2005 should take place. So the first thing that happened was invitation to member states by Dr. Tedros to submit proposed amendments. And this ended on 30th of September 2024. Not 2024, it ended on 30th September, the submission actually, 2022. And then the IHR review committee was convened. This committee worked from 2022 to January 2023 to review the amendments and provide their technical advice to the WHO DG, and he submitted their own reports to member states. The working group on IHR amendments was also established, and they started their work starting from November 2022, which ended, of course, on 1st June 2024 with the adoption of the amended IHR. So there was like a 1 week in between the WG-IHR work and the drafting group that was established to finish the remaining areas where they didn't have consensus, and then they adopted it. Okay, so out of the over 300 articles that were 300 proposed amendments that were submitted, at the end of the day, we had 27 of the 66 articles amended, and then 3 new definitions were also added to Article 1. Then we had amendment on 6 of the 9 annexes, and then we had 2 new articles added to the amended IHR. So this is a snapshot of the areas where the different amendments were submitted and the number of amendments. So in areas like notification, verification, and the provision of information, you can see the relevant article. There were over 70 proposed amendments. And regarding health measures, points of entry documents, over 54. Concerning core capacities, Annex 1, over 45 amendments. Then collaboration and coordination. We also had the public health response and temporary recommendations. Convening and functioning of the emergency committee, determination of fake, the definition, scope and principles, responsible authorities, final provisions, compliance and implementation. So you can look at it later and see the details. So the key areas of amendments. First is the establishment of the National IHR Authority, which falls under Article 1 and 4. Determination of a pandemic emergency, Article 1 and 12. The issue of solidarity and equity, which looks around the issue of health products and the issue of implementation committee, and then coordinating financing mechanism. Then the issues around the points of entry, health documents, non-digital and digital formats. So we will go into more details as we proceed with the discussion today. So the steps leading into enforcement of the amendment, the initial part was about language conformity and accuracy. You know, we have 6 UN languages, and sometimes some of the words are different when you say it in English and the interpretation. So that happened. All member states, I'm sure everyone has received this language conformity check. And the DG, the next step was notification about the amendment. The Director General notified member states as well, reservations or rejections, and this closed on the 19th of July. You heard from Dr. Dick that only one member state from AFRO wanted some additional time, but every other member states did just agreed with the amendments. And then the entry into force, of course, is 19 September, where you are seeing some countries 19 September, others much later, is because of the 2022 amendment that I spoke of earlier. So for countries, these 4 countries that express reservation, the default is the original IHR 2005, so which is going to be 24 months. For the other countries that did not express reservation, it's going to be 12 months going forward. Okay, so now we are going to go, this is just the overview of what happened around the amendment process itself. We are going to go into details of the different areas of amendments. So under Article 1, there are so many definitions that were added, amended. So the first point I'm going to take is about the issue of the National IHR Authority. So before the amendment, we have the National IHR focal point, and last week we went into details of what the National IHR focal point is, what their mandatory functions are, as well as some of the expanded functions. So again, just as a reminder, the National IHR focal point, based on the definition on Article 1, is the national center designated by each state party, which shall be accessible at all times for communications with WHO and IHR contact point under these regulations. So the IHR NFP was kept, and then in the amendment, we have one addition, which is called the National IHR Authority, and is defined as the entity designated or established by the state party at the national level to coordinate the implementation of these regulations within the jurisdiction of the state party. So we have different authorities. The main components are 3. One is the addition, the first one, the National IHR Authority. I've just read out the definition. The National IHR focal point remains the same. It has not changed. And then we have the issue of responsible competent authority under the POE. So regarding the National IHR Authority, each state party shall designate or establish, in accordance with its national law and context, 1 or 2 entities to serve as National IHR Authority and National IHR focal point. So this means that depending on how your country functions, you can either have 1 or 2. I heard Dr. Dix mentioning some of the countries willing to have their National Public Health Institute to also double as the NFP as well as the NIA. So the responsibility of the NIA is to coordinate the implementation of IHR within the country. And part of the reason, actually, if you remember from the beginning, I spoke about the DG convening the IHR review committee on the functioning of the IHR during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have had previous review committee before. And this committee, part of the things they actually noted in their report is that the implementation of IHR was actually not optimal. Like we could have done better with the implementation of the regulations. And there was no, like, this big overall entity that oversees the entire implementation of the IHR. We have the NFP, but the NFP, they have their specific function. Doesn't cover everything in the IHR. Although, as we heard from the presentation last week. Okay, Dr. Miriam?
Yeah, Dr. Mary, we are experiencing a break from you. You keep getting interfered with. I don't know if switching off your camera will give strength to your internet.
Oh.
Colleagues, you'll excuse us. Dr. Mary is calling in from Eritrea, Asmara. The internet may not be very strong. Yeah.
I can also change my computer. Is it very bad?
Go ahead, yeah.
No, I think proceed. I think it's
No,
better now.
we are not. Maybe it
It's
is from your
better.
side of medium. Here is fine. We are getting it
Please
all
proceed.
right.
Just alert me because, yeah, I can actually change my computer as well. So,
No, I think
but
proceed.
my
I
camera
think it's
is
okay.
Proceed, you're now clearer.
okay. Okay, sure. I'll keep the camera off until we get to question and answer. So let me go back. National IHR Authority, because this is one of the sticky points. It says each state party shall designate or establish National IHR Authority. So you can have either one or two. We said the NFP is already there. The amendment did not touch on the NFP. NFP will continue to deliver on their duties. But there is then an additional entity that is supposed to be responsible for the overall coordination of the IHR implementation within the state party. So as I was explaining, that the review committee on the functioning of the IHR during the COVID-19 pandemic noted that the implementation of the IHR was not optimal. It could have been better with the implementation, basically. And even the IPPPR, the Independent Panel on Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness and Response, they noted that the world was ill prepared to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And secondly, if you remember when the public health measures, countries started implementing measures to close their borders. Sitting in AFRO, we saw a lot of different implementations because we were monitoring this implementation of additional measures, IHR Article 43. So we were monitoring these measures and sharing the information on the dashboard for countries to actually see. And the approach to this measure was actually very variable. I'm seeing another hand raised. Is this something urgent?
No, please proceed, I think.
Okay. So some countries, actually, the NFPs were consulted by the government before these travel measures were implemented. In some countries, the NFPs actually saw the announcement on TV, just like we saw it from Brazzaville, that the borders were closed. So then part of the issues that the review committee looked at was, okay, is the NFP really positioned at that high level that will enable them to have access like to the highest level of government, like the office of the president, the office of the prime minister, or even the minister himself of health. So these were some of the different considerations in addition to others that actually brought about this discussion around the National IHR Authority, is to address some of those gaps that were identified. Okay, so let me just move. I'm sure we have many questions later. So once this national IHR authority is established, the contact details already, the practice right now is that the contact details of the IHR National Focal Point is available for all countries globally on the EIS, the Event Information Site. It's a secure site that is only accessible to the national IHR focal points. And now the National IHR Authority, the contact details is expected to be on the EIS as well, as member states will establish and provide. So together with the NFP contact details, they will be updated annually as we are doing for the NFP currently. And state parties are expected to make any legal or administrative changes that will be required to empower the National IHR Authority to do their work. Okay, so just a quick look at what member state could consider to help them decide whether they want to establish or they want to designate. Designate means there is an entity that already exists and they want to add that function of the National IHR Authority is. So the first question to ask is the institutional entity currently operating as NFP adequately positioned and able to discharge the NIA functions? In AFRO countries, we have quite a number of countries, even though the NFPs, they operate differently in different countries, but quite a number of countries have the National Public Health Institute, for instance, a particular department within the institute as serving as the NFP. So this is one example of a country within AFRO. So if the answer is yes, let's say a country has the National Public Health Institute as their NFP, and they think the National Public Health Institute is well positioned to be the national IHR authority, then the next step is to make any administrative or legal changes that will empower the institution to discharge these duties. If the answer is no, the next step is there another existing institutional entity that is positioned to discharge these duties? If the answer is yes, again, is to make the legal administrative requirement to empower them to do the work. If the answer is no, it means this particular country is required to establish the new National IHR Authority. And when it is established, again, it needs the legal backing. And once this is done, then, like we said in the previous slide, the contact details should be provided to WHO, just like you are currently providing the contact details of the NFPs, and this will be published on the EIS. Okay, so this is a suggestion of where, as you know, globally, 194 member states, 196 state parties. People have different legislation, the context is quite different, but what you should note is that the establishment or designation of the National IHR Authority is 100% at the discretion of the national authority. Some of these possible suggestions, you can look at it and see what works in your context. Entity responsible for relations with Ministry of Health within Office of the Head of State, entity responsible for relations with the Ministry of Health within Prime Minister's Office, Office of the Minister or equivalent of Health. It could also be Minister of Foreign Affairs, Office of the Deputy Minister of Health or equivalent, Office of the Permanent Secretary, National Public Health Institute, as in the case of a lot of countries within AFRO, Office of the DG, Department of International Relations, office responsible for Ministry of Foreign Affairs or equivalent. So the main thing here is that that office or the entity must have that level of seniority to be able to make decisions and oversee the implementation of the IHR itself in totality. And that office should have access to the highest level of government, from the Minister of Health to the Office of the Prime Minister or Office of the President. So that's the most important part. It depends on how it works in your country and some of your legal and administrative backing to operationalize it. So this takes me to another new definition that was added, the pandemic emergency. So currently we have the public health emergency of international concern. Everyone has heard about FAKE if you are in the IHR business, because we have had so many emergency committees convene and a lot of FAKE declared in the recent past. So we know what a FAKE is. It's a public health emergency that constitutes a risk to other states through international spread and potentially require a coordinated international response. And then now we have the pandemic emergency, which is a continuum actually from the FAKE now to the pandemic emergency. If you remember, during the COVID-19 pandemic started in January, and it was declared a FAKE towards the end of January. But it wasn't declared a pandemic until March. And part of the reason is because there was no really scientific definition to determine what a pandemic was at the time. So during this review, the pandemic emergency was introduced, which is a public health emergency of international concern. So the pandemic emergency is first of all a FAKE that is caused by a communicable diseases and or has high risk of having wide geographical spread to other multiple states. It exceeds or high risk of exceeding the capacity of health system to respond, is causing or is at high risk of causing substantial social and economic disruption, like we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, including disruption to international traffic and trade. Then it requires rapid, equitable, and enhanced coordinated international action using a whole of government and a whole of society approach. Okay. So to determine a FAKE and a pandemic emergency, this is under Article 12 of the regulations. So we all know that global early warning and response is around the definition of FAKE. Everybody knows what a FAKE is. So a pandemic emergency, like I explained, is first of all a FAKE. It's a continuum. So anytime the emergency committee is convened to determine whether an event constitutes a public health emergency of international concern, they will at the same time also consider the criteria for pandemic emergency. So the definition of pandemic emergency encompasses both a potential and actual pandemic. Like FAKE, the determination of pandemic emergency implies issuance of temporary recommendation. And the determination or termination of a FAKE or pandemic emergency can be simultaneous or sequential. So let me try to break it down so that you understand a little bit. So let's say a public health emergency is happening and a country has completed the decision instrument and notified the WHO of the event, and DG feels that he should convene the emergency committee. So the emergency committee will be convened, and the emergency committee will review the situation based on the criteria for determining a fake. They will advise the DG whether they think this event constitutes a fake or not. And now with this new addition, they will also look at the criteria for the pandemic emergency and advise the DG whether this constitutes a fake and a pandemic emergency or not. Then the Director General, looking at the report of the emergency committee, will determine whether this is a fake. He will also determine whether this is a pandemic emergency. Determination also happens if you put it in a reverse way. So the emergency committee normally meets every 3 months following the declaration of a fake. And when it is reviewed that the emergency no longer constitutes a fake, then the report could be submitted to the DG to consider the removal of the fake, like we had with the COVID and the previous mpox, even though we are back to the fake again. Okay, so I've explained this, the determination of the fake, how the DG does that. So what we are required as state parties to do from this is about the NIA and the other amendments. By 19th of July, it's passed already. Dr. Dick has already explained this, to make a declaration whether or not a state party is able to make adjustments in their legislative or administrative arrangements. Then the issue of establishment of the National IHR Authority and provide the details to WHO. Already we have the details of the National IHR focal point, but if you want to change the NFP, then you can still provide the details. This is updated annually as explained earlier. So we are expecting entry into force by September 19. And another expectation from member states is that we need to continue to invest on strengthening these four capacities, especially member states in Africa. Countries are still lagging when it comes to the implementation of IHR and development of these core capacities. Okay, so going to Article 2 now. The issue of purpose and scope this is just minor. The major ones are the pandemic emergency that we just described, the National IHR Authority. This is just minor amendment in the purpose and scope. You see the inclusion of prepare for. So basically this language, prepare for, is spread across the entire instruments. The original IHR 2005 does not have the language for preparedness. It's about prevention, protection, and control. Now we have preparedness, like we said, it's also coming from some of those reviews that were done for the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, the world was ill-prepared to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. So the core capacities, even in Annex 1, the issue of preparedness has been included under the core capacities. We currently have 15. We used to have 13, and then it is now 15. And this is also coming from the review of the COVID-19 response, where some of the capacities, the committees felt that they need to be standing alone. Like financing was together with policy and legislation. Now financing is standing alone. The issue of IPC, it was together with health service provision. It's now standing alone. We have community engagement added to risk communication. And then you will see border health added to POE. Originally, it was just POE. This is still the same thing, the issue of implementation of travel measures during COVID-19 pandemic. So to address that. So these are the revisions. Member states are expected to ensure that we are not focusing only on surveillance, laboratory, but all the 15 core capacities. We are expected to build all of them. So state parties, by virtue of the implication of the preparedness, we are supposed to continue to strengthen institutions that have the mandate, actually. Have the mandate for implementation and development of the core capacities. Financing has been a challenge. Under the amendment, you will hear from our colleague about the coordinated financing mechanism. But member states are expected to also make sure that they create budget lines for pandemic prevention and preparedness. Then we need to make sure that the workforce is available across all the core capacities. Like I said earlier, not focusing on specific capacities that are easy to implement, but ensuring that all the 15 core capacities are actually implemented. Then surveillance, I know we are doing well across the region in surveillance, but we need to make sure that we continue to strengthen that and continue to review. Last week, we heard about the issue of simulation exercises, after action reviews, inter-action reviews, early action reviews. This is to make sure that we are testing the functionality of the capacities. If you remember from the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries that had a lot of high scores still did not do so well because the functionality of the capacities were actually limited. And because they are not being tested to regular outbreaks, they have not had outbreak for years, and the exercises are not regular. Then when the emergency occurred, then they take us by surprise. And WHO will continue to support the capacity building across all the different core capacities, and also provide the relevant tools. The tools are always being revised to capture the reality. Okay. So on principle, Dr. Magub or Dr. Fatima, they are going to go into the issue of the solidarity. So I will just touch it briefly, and they will expatiate on that. As we heard from Dr. Dick's speech, the issue of equity and solidarity was really pushed hard by the Africa Group. And this has now been added under the principle in the new amendment. So there will be the issue to promote equity and solidarity. So equity, just briefly, structural imbalances, barriers to access, so medical countermeasures in general. And solidarity is about international cooperation and mutual assistance. You will hear a lot about the solidarity. There was a lot around Article 44, revision of Article 44 of the IHR 2005. So you will hear more on the solidarity during that presentation. So the whole idea is also being pushed into the pandemic treaty, just to ensure that member states are collaborating and cooperating, and that no one is left behind when it comes to the issue of emergency or pandemic response, because we saw the challenges that developing countries faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the vaccine, the PPEs, the other medical countermeasures were very, very limited, including medicines, diagnostic at the beginning of the pandemic across developing countries. Actually, they were very, very limited. So this was geared towards ensuring that we address that gap. The pandemic treaty is going to cover a lot more in these areas. So let me stop here. I'm ready to take your questions. Over to you, Dr. Allen.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. Very interesting and very insightful. We want to thank you for that very, very clear presentation. You led us through what has so far been done, the chronology, the process, the submission, right from submission to the amendments, the decision tree when to decide which institution to consider, among others, but also not forgetting, the expectations from the member states and WHO. I know we are behind time, but I will allow for about 6 minutes of questions. Please use, like we said, please use the provision for Q&A. I see there are there are about 2 questions already there, but also you have an option to raise your hand and Amarachi will help you, to unmute. So we have, I think, the questions have been answered. There are 2. Let me give chance to Michael to answer the first question live. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Allen. I think the first one had to do with whether pandemic emergency, it appears is not considering the issue of the seriousness of the event in declaring a pandemic emergency. I just responded by saying it's not entirely so. Some considerations definitely have been made, because let's remember pandemic emergency somehow emanates from public health emergency of international concern, which actually looks at severity of disease. But for pandemic emergency, in that addition, the fact it's issue also be caused by a communicable disease. So there's that linkage, which does not exclusively or entirely leave out the issue of, what do you call it? The issue of severity of the disease, since that has been adequately catered for under fake. So adding that to it being caused by a communicable disease, and maybe infedrance, considering economic disruptions and all that, that will now let us land in the arena of whether it's the pandemic emergency of international concern. But I've also typed whatever I've said here as well. Thank you, Noble.
Thank you very much. I think there's another question from Kwakwan. He's saying, dear Dr. Mary, please acknowledge if the Director General's determination of a fake now extends to determining if a pandemic emergency has occurred. And then...
Yes, this is... Okay.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is what Michael just finished explaining. Basically, a pandemic emergency is first of all a fake. So the criteria for fake has to be met. And in addition to that, if the criteria we listed under the pandemic emergency is fulfilled, so an event can be a fake as well as a pandemic emergency at the same time. Or an event can just be a fake, right? But an event cannot be a pandemic emergency without being, first of all, a fake. I hope this is clear.
I think that's very clear, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm sure it was something that needed clarification. We have a hand up.
And maybe to add, Alan, that both are declared by the Director General. I think that was the question. Yes, both are declared by the Director General. Either at the same time, or one can be a fake and then extend to a pandemic emergency, and then he declares it also after. Thank you.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it also
Thank you very
follows
much.
the principle. The principle set out for the declaration of fake, it follows the same thing. An emergency committee will be convened. They will review the situation against the criteria for both the fake and the pandemic emergency, and then advise the DG. Then the DG will determine whether this is a fake. He will also determine whether this is a pandemic emergency. The reverse happens when the termination of a pandemic emergency or a fake will also take place. So again, emergency committee will meet. They will advise the DG, and the DG can then determine that this event no longer constitutes a fake or a pandemic emergency. All of them will also come with issuance of temporary recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We have a hand up, Ernest Kalfan. Please go ahead, unmute, and then ask your question. Okay, I think we're finding challenges.
Bonjour,
okay.
Bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous me suivez?
Please go ahead.
Bonjour. Oui, j'ai bien suivi Mary dans son exposé et je voulais vraiment la féliciter pour cette brillante présentation. Ma préoccupation est par rapport à la mise en place de l'autorité nationale du RSI. Pour les pays où l'Institut national de santé publique existe, c'est facile pour mettre en place cette autorité. Mais par contre, là où les pays n'ont pas encore mis en place l'Institut de santé publique, mais ils nous demandent de créer l'autorité nationale du RSI. Alors moi, je me dis, est-ce qu'il n'y aura pas des comités, plus d'institutions qui ne seront pas fonctionnels? Est-ce que n'est-il pas possible d'appuyer les pays pour mettre en place l'Institut national de santé publique? À ce moment, ça pourrait être facile pour gérer en même temps l'autorité nationale du RSI. Voilà ma préoccupation. Si vous m'entendez, je vous redonne la parole à vous.
Dr. Alan, the English translation is not working from my side. Can someone help me?
Maybe.
Dr. Bukare, can you help me understand his question well? I know it's on NIA, but I need to understand the details.
Yeah, the question was about a country where there is no National Public Health Institute, and you advise that they can have the NFP and another authority, and he's asking if they are going to be supported to create such an organ. It is about the establishment of the NIA in a country where there is only...
Yes.
Je peux revenir sur ma question. Hein. Il y a des problèmes. La traduction n'est pas ce que j'ai dit exactement.
Okay.
The
French translation is now working.
Là où il n'y a pas l'Institut national de santé publique, est-ce que, mais comme
Ernest, can you please repeat your question? The translation is now back. Or it has been answered? If it has been answered, then we can move on.
No, I think it's internet. If
Oui,
it's there, can
je
we ask the
disais
question again?
les pays qui ont l'Institut national de santé publique, Mairie dit qu'il n'y a pas de problème. À ce moment, l'autorité nationale du RSI peut être implantée à ce niveau. Mais là où l'Institut national de santé publique n'existe pas, est-ce que n'est-il pas possible d'appuyer les pays à mettre en place l'Institut national de santé publique pour abriter en même temps aussi l'autorité du RSI pour éviter la duplication des institutions, la multiplicité des comités et qui par la suite ne seront pas fonctionnels. Voilà ma préoccupation.
Okay, very clear.
Yes, so
Mary,
yes, so
it.
our advice is that it doesn't have to be the National Public Health Institute. It's 100% at the discretion of the national government to see what is it that exists within their context and look at which entity they think within the government can discharge that duty, right? But if the government is already in the process of establishment of the National Public Health Institute, then that will work. But if the government does not have any plan of establishing a National Public Health Institute, then you can look at the different suggestions and see which of the entities is placed to discharge that duty. Again, the NFP itself, depending on what the level of the NFP you have in your country, the NFP itself, if the government feels that the NFP can discharge that duty, in a situation where the NFP is not one person, the NFP is a center, and the country feels that the NFP is able to discharge that duty, then they can just adjust their legal and administrative instruments to give them that authority to discharge. So it's not like one size fits all. It depends on your context, what exists within your country. And if you have doubt, WHO can work out with you specific countries to look at what can work for your context. So that country-specific support will be available to the regional office.
Thank you. I think we need to wrap up this session, but I have two more questions. Tampa Alpha and then Dr. Ganda. Tampa, quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mary, for the presentation. So my concern is similar to the previous question about the IHR focal point. Whether the country has an existing IHR focal point that is attached to an institution or a new one. Has there been any discussion? Was there any discussion or consideration around supporting the operation of this authority? And then the second thing, was there any discussion around these member countries that don't have staff assigned exclusively as IHR focal person, but instead secondment staff who have another task that required 100% of their time, appointing them as IHR focal person, and at the end of the day, they are not accessible to provide the required information. Whether these issues were also discussed, these details were discussed in the new amendment. Thank you.
This is a very important question. Like I said earlier in the presentation, the experience in AFRO specifically is that countries have different ways they are implementing the NFP. Quite a good number, the NFPs are centers, but we still have countries where the NFP is an individual, and there are so many challenges with that. when it comes to implementation, so if that is the case, it means that the country needs to take action to strengthen both institutions, because this is now, will I say, an obligation under the IHR. We are expected to do it and to do it correctly. So it means that we need to do advocacy for strengthening the NFP, if people are doing the NFP together with other functions, to see how they can be strengthened, and the NIA to look carefully into the structure within the country and see which of the institution will be best placed to discharge the duties of the NIA. Of course, we said it should have the high level of seniority. It should be able to have, it should have at least access directly to the minister, or even the office of the prime minister, or the office of the president. Somewhat, at least it should be accessible to them. Right? So basically, it's going to be a lot of advocacy at the country level to be able to meet these criteria. The amendment says member states should do it, and they have agreed by adopting that they want to do it. So if this doesn't exist in a country, then we will need a high-level advocacy to make that happen. And based on country-specific context, the regional office will work with the WHO representative to help you with that level of advocacy at the highest level of government. Dr.
Thank you very
Miriam,
much.
feel free to jump in, yes, if you want to add anything.
Thank you very much. I think let's give Ganda a chance, the last question, and then we move on to the next session.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Thank you, Dr. Mary, for the presentation. I think my first question has been answered already. It was also on the IHR authority and the NFP. But my second question was a bit more operational. I wanted to know what is the impact of this? What was the impact of this new amendment on the IHR monitoring and evaluation framework, which the NFPs currently implement in the countries that we have the simulation exercises, joint evaluations, state partner reviews, and after an interaction review. So do these amendments have an impact? Do they modify this framework? And if they do, what are the modifications to the framework? Thank you.
I have
Yeah,
answered the
thank
question in the, I've answered the question in the Q&A area to indicate that in principle, no. In principle, no. We'll still continue with the IHR M&E, but the tools will be amended in the coming year or so, because the annual state party report and the JEE tools will certainly cover the issues of the NIA and the other amendments that have been included. The AARs should be able to look into issues of equity and solidarity and all that, and the funding mechanisms. So the tools will be amended, but the methods, the framework will still be implemented. I think we'll be updating as we go by. Over.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
That's what it is. Yeah. So you are still going to have your SPA, your JEE, CMEX, all the reviews, IAR. It's just that there might be some updates of the tools as we proceed. It was also done, immediately after the COVID-19 pandemic, where some of these issues were coming out, even before the 2024 amendment. We had the review of the tools, actually, both the JEE tool as well as the SPA tool. And this is the point where we moved from the capacities 13 to 15 and also the number of indicators increased to about 35. So this will be an ongoing process to adjust with the realities and accommodate the new additions, but the framework will remain the same. Thank you. And over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mary, and the panelists.
There's still one more hand, Alan, if you can be flexible.
Okay, let me see. Okay. Joseph, Feleke Joseph, if you can quickly answer. I mean, ask a question. Joseph, do you hear us? We cannot see we cannot hear you. I cannot see your microphone
Has he
provision.
been given access to microphone? Amarachi, can you help him with microphone, please?
Okay, Joseph, please go ahead. All right, I think we're finding challenges with him unmuting. Please put your question into the Q&A and the panelists will respond. But even then, after the second session, we shall have a chance for live questions. So thank you very much, Dr. Mary, and thank you participants for having a very interactive session. So we are moving on to the next session. It will be delivered by our colleague from AFRO, Dr. Hamid Majoub. Dr. Hamid Majoub is a technical officer in charge of IHR, and he's going to take us through a brief presentation of about 30 minutes to highlight a few issues around solidarity, equity, and the amendments related to the associated annexes. I hope the connection is favorable. I know Dr. Majoub is connecting from Syria, so let's hope that he's able to, to go around the bottlenecks of the internet. Over to you, Dr. Hamid, for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Alan. And thank you so much, Dr. Mary, for her excellent presentation that really set the scene for the upcoming articles. And thank you so much, and good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and partners, and thank you so much for being with us today. So I'm pleased to present on the amendment to the International Health Regulation 2005, with a particular focus on the renewed global commitment to equity, solidarity, access, collaboration, specifically during the public health responses. So this amendment, the one that I'm going to discuss and the one that has been discussed by Dr. Mary, reflect a collective recognition that no one is safe until everyone is safe, and that access, support, and shared responsibility must be at the heart and the core of our global preparedness and response efforts. Next slide, please, Fatima. So our discussion will focus on three key areas. Number one, Article 13, which strengthens the obligations for public health response with an emphasis on equitable access to relevant health products for all countries, particularly during response. Then Article 44 bis, which establishes a coordinated financial mechanism to support countries, particularly low and middle income countries, in building and sustaining IHR core capacity. And finally, Article 54 bis, which introduced the State Party Implementation Committee, designed to support mutual accountability, the peer support, technical collaboration for effective IHR implementation. So together, these provisions and their connotations aim to build a more inclusive, responsive, and cooperative global health security system, which is grounded in the principles of solidarity, equity, access, and as well as partnership. So let us now take a closer look, next slide please, Fatima, at how these amendments are shaping a more just and effective international health framework. So Article 13 focus on strengthening the public health response to emerging threats and emergencies. It begins by emphasizing the importance of developing, maintaining, and reinforcing national capacity to prevent, prepare for, and respond to public health risks and events that may constitute a public health emergency of international concern. So when a state party identifies a justified need for support, it may report this need to the World Health Organization along with an implementation plan outlining the type of assistance required. In turn, WHO is expected to collaborate with the state party by providing technical guidance and support, which is tailored to the needs and circumstances of the particular situation in that country. During declared public health emergency of international concern, according to provision of this article, WHO plays a central role in coordinating the international response. This includes assessing the severity of the global risk, evaluating the adequacy of control measures in place, and offering targeted support to the affected country or countries. And most importantly, all state parties are expected to actively support the World Health Organization coordinated response activities. So this collective approach that includes the responsibility of the member state and WHO ensure a timely, effective, and a harmonized global response to public health emergencies, in particular the FIC, as well as the pandemic emergency. Next slide, please, Fatima. So, in the updated version of Article 13, several important new elements have been introduced to strengthen the global public health response. First, the scope of the article itself has been broadened to explicitly include not only public health emergency of international concern or FIC, but also pandemic emergencies. So this alignment ensures that the article remain applicable throughout the full spectrum of the international health crisis. Second, a strong emphasis is now placed in ensuring access to relevant health products during both public health emergency of international concern and pandemic emergencies. So this reflects the recognition that the equitable access to tools or products like vaccines, diagnostic, and treatment is central to an effective response. Also, this article introduced the renewed commitment to solidarity. It clearly states that the WHO shall support the state party and coordinate international response activity, supporting a more unified global effort. Additionally, the principles of access and equity are reinforced by the new amendment, as the WHO is tasked with facilitating access and working proactively to remove barriers, especially for countries in need, so that achieving the main principle of solidarity is that no one is left behind during an emergency. Finally, the article now highlights the importance of collaboration. State parties are expected to assist one another and to support the WHO-led efforts and intervention activities. So this includes, for example, sharing information, sharing resources, technical expertise, which are all aimed to strengthen collective preparedness and response. So together, all these additions mark a significant evolution of Article 13, especially the one of access and solidarity. So it's better reflect the lessons learned from recent global emergencies, including COVID-19, that the need for more coordinated, equitable, and inclusive response. Next, please. So the new Article 44 piece introduced a significant new development in the international health regulation, which is the establishment of the coordinating financial mechanism. This mechanism is designed to function under the authority and strategic guidance of the World Health Assembly. Its overarching purpose is to strengthen global health security by ensuring that financing is better aligned with the needs and priority of the state party. The mechanism has 4 key objectives. First, to promote the provision of timely, predictable, and sustainable financing, meaning that moving away from an ad hoc or crisis-driven funding and ensuring that resources are available when and where they are needed most. Second, to support the development, strengthening, and maintenance of core capacity as outlined in the amended Annex 1 of the regulations as mentioned by Dr. Mary. These core capacity are the foundation of effective, for example, surveillance, detection, and response system at national, subnational, and local level. Third, the mechanism aims to maximize the availability of financing to meet implementation needs, particularly for countries that face resource constraints. The mechanism is designed to be responsive to the specific priorities identified by state parties. Finally, it will work to mobilize new and additional financial resources. So, this includes supporting, for example, partnership, exploring innovative and financing approach to expand the pool of available funds. So we can say in short that Article 44 piece is about closing the gap between the ambition and the implementation, ensuring that all countries, especially the low and middle income countries, are not only expected to meet obligations under IHR, but are also financially supported in doing so. Next, please. So first, there is a clear obligation to conduct relevant needs and funding gap analysis. This is a fundamental. To allocate resources effectively, we must understand the specific implementation needs of all state parties in need, in particular low and middle income countries. So this means working closely with the national stakeholder, collecting data, identifying context-specific gaps, whether it is in, for example, in surveillance, laboratory capacity, workforce, or emergency response system. So only with a clear picture can we prioritize financing in a way that it is a more responsive, it's a more equitable, and it is needs driven. So secondly, the mechanism should promote harmonization, coherence, and coordination across all existing national, regional, or global financing instruments. We are not starting from scratch. There are several global and regional mechanisms already in place, but it seems it's fragmented and the fragmentation persists. The mechanism is accordingly tasked to support the alignment between this instrument, minimizing duplication, and enhancing synergies. Such coordination will make funding more predictable, funding will be more accessible and impactful, especially for countries with limited physical space. Thirdly, the mechanism must identify and make available all resources of financing that can support implementation. of international health of the obligation under international health regulation. This include public and private, domestic and international funding streams, aligning them together and putting them in a coherent coherence scheme. Finally, the mechanism should facilitate voluntary monetary contributions, directing these contributions toward key organizations and entities that provide implementation support. For example, this include technical assistance providers, regional platforms, for example, operational partners that work directly with countries. By doing so, we will ensure that these contributions are strategic, targeted, and responsive to real-time needs, and also it will strengthen collective capacity and solidarity. So for the mechanism to by fulfilling their obligations and roles, the mechanism can become a cornerstone for implementation, anchored in equity, transparency, and sustainability. So we can say that it is not just about mobilizing resources and mobilizing additional funding, but it's about doing so in a way that is more smarter, with justice, and more coordinated, serving the shared objective of protecting everyone and as well as the future health emergencies. And next, please. So, as we continue to strengthen the implementation of the international health regulation, it's important to highlight the role of newly proposed Article 54 bis, which sets out the establishment of the State Party Implementation Committee. This committee is a key component of the broader implementation architecture under the amended international health regulation. The rationale behind this amendment has been centered on designing a committee with a facilitative and a consultative approach, not to penalize, but to support member states in meeting their obligations, particularly those outlined in Article 44 bis that has been just discussed, as well as the amendment to Article 44, the collaboration and assistance. So the objective of the committee under Article 44 bis is to promote effective, sustainable, and equitable implementation of IHR. The committee will review information. The committee will provide guidance and offer technical and operational support to state parties facing challenge in fulfilling their obligations. So this is done, of course, with full respect for national sovereignty, consistent with the principle of the IHR outlined in Article 3, the principles of equity, transparency, and solidarity. Importantly, this committee also enhances, of course, the complementarity between the IHR amendment and the pandemic agreement, as we will see later. So through this committee, the member state aim to support an collaborative space to address challenge constructively. Next, please, Fatima. So the International Health Regulation Implementation Committee, as we said, it's play a crucial role in enhancing global health security. So this committee is tasked with promoting and supporting learning opportunities, facilitating the exchange of best practice, and supporting collaboration among state parties. So to ensure effective guidance and oversight, the committee will establish a dedicated subcommittee which composed of representatives from all member states and from all state parties to the international health regulation. This subcommittee will be responsible for providing technical advice on a matter related to the IHR, and of course, the subcommittee will report its findings and recommendations back to the main committee. The meeting of the committee and its subcommittees will occur at least once every 2 years creating a structured environment for ongoing dialogue and collaboration between member states. The governance of the committee is structured to ensure representation from various global regions. A chair and a vice chair will be elected by the committee members, and they will serve a 2-year term and rotate on a regional basis. Of course, this is very important to promote inclusivity and equitable representation of the leadership of different regions. So through this arrangement, that has the aforementioned arrangement, the implementation committee, it's aimed to strengthen the capacities of the state party, enhance resilience against health emergencies, ensure compliance with the IHR mandate, and as well as translating the basic principles of solidarity. Next, please. So as we just mentioned, there is a strong complementarity between the amendment to the International Health Regulation and the Pandemic Agreement. In particular, for example, Article 18 of the Pandemic Agreement, which addresses the sustainable financing, will be supported by the newly proposed Article 44 bis of the IHR 2005, which establishes a coordinated financial mechanism. This mechanism, under International Health Regulation, will play a key role in mobilizing and coordinating financial resources to support the objective of Article 18 of the Pandemic Agreement, ensuring financing is timely, predictable, and sustainable. On the other hand, Article 19 of the Pandemic Agreement, which is a conference of party, the governing body of the Pandemic Agreement, will also benefit from the State Party Implementation Committee proposed under Article 54 bis of the amended International Health Regulation. So this committee can be used as well to monitor the implementation, support the compliance, and promote synergy between both legal instruments, ensuring that coordinated and mutually reinforced approach is in place. Next, please, Fatima. So finally, we can say that the proposed amendment to the International Health Regulation, it really offers a transformative approach for the developing countries, and in particular for the African countries, because African countries were champion of pushing the principles of solidarity and equity and access during the negotiation of the Pandemic Agreement and the IHR Amendment. So, in summary, just to wrap up, Article 13 reinforces the principle of equitable access. Article 44 on the coordinated financial mechanism also unlock timely and predictable financing, as well as Article 54 bis. The implementation committee, it's provide a collaborative platform where African countries as well as other countries with similar contexts can share their experience, receive technical guidance, and influence global health governance on equal footing. So together, all this reform will empower Eastern Mediterranean, African region to have a more stronger, of course, and resilient system. And back again to the achieving the main principle of solidarity, equity, and shared responsibility. So by this, we reach the end of the presentation, and over to you, Alan.
Thank you very, very much. Very, very good presentation. Very interesting submissions. And I'm sure there are some questions regarding this. And thank you very much for creating time to, to pass on this very important information. So we are going to a Q&A session. Please, colleagues, once again, feel free to raise your hand, and then they'll give you access to the speaker, but also the Q&A questions. Option is available, and as I can see, most of the questions have been answered, but we may need to just re-emphasize them. In case there are additions from the panelists, feel free to come in. Dr. Stephen, Mary, please come in.
Yes, so it's just to answer the question of Selemogo. Let me read the question in case it might benefit others. What additional benefits above those of declaring a fake would we have enjoyed had COVID been declared a pandemic emergency? I.e., what additional measures does the new declaration bring? Okay, so let me go back to the COVID-19 response. You know, the COVID-19 response, and it's from the experience of the COVID that necessitated the addition of the declaration of the pandemic emergency, actually. So from the COVID-19 pandemic, the fake was declared end of January. And from the experience we saw, member states, even though it's the highest global level of alerts, I didn't think across all the levels of government, they understood it as such. Because even when we were doing media interview, they were asking why is WHO declaring a pandemic in March? But a fake was already declared in January. But I think member states did not feel the gravity of the problem. The moment the DG declared the COVID-19 a pandemic, there was swift action, both positive and negative. It was at that point that the political level of government understood that this was a really serious issue, and they started taking action to respond to the pandemic, of course, including triggering their emergency response mechanisms. But a lot of them didn't do that when we had the fake. It was still almost like business as usual, if I can say. And the moment the pandemic was declared, then they started triggering their emergency response act and started doing things differently. So this actually, we saw a lot more action, but in addition to the positive action, we also saw negative actions. There was a lot of implementation of additional measures, Article 43, and countries were closing and closing and closing. So, and again, the pandemic emergency itself is beyond fake, actually, because this is something that has expanded far much beyond what you can imagine that fake can do. It has gone beyond the normal health sector, affecting the entire economy, social aspects, and everything. So this is what informed actually even the proposed recommendation. So it's going to be like a scale. It's because not all of it was accepted, because initially the proposal was going to be, there was going to be an alert, which at the end of the day, they felt that, okay, once WHO published an event on the EIS, it's already an alert. So it was going to be alert, fake, and pandemic emergency. So like a graded scale. So basically the pandemic emergency is a scale higher than the fake itself. And once you declare this, we expect a mobilization of the entire government, the whole of government, whole of society approach. Over.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, we have a hand raised up. Colleague Kwakan, please unmute and ask your question. Kwakwan. You're unmuted?
Okay.
No, not yet.
Yes.
Yes,
Are you
now.
hearing me now?
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alan, for the opportunity, and thanks to the colleague for the brilliant, informative session. I have a question and also a concern. The first question concerns the new concepts that is just discussed, specifically equity and solidarity. So my question there is, are these new concepts legally binding or enforceable measures on member states? Or they are just useful tools for advocacy like what we've been doing prior to COVID-19? Because the experiences we had across countries during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were developed countries with these health products, and including vaccines and test kits. And for developing countries to access those, there were challenges until after a lot of advocacy at the highest level of the organization, and also involvement of other stakeholders. It was the time that these health products were released to developing countries. So my question is, in these amendments, is there any provision that ensure that these concepts are binding on all member states of the organization? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Roberta, Dr. Roberta, you want to take the question on the floor?
Yes, thank you. Is Roberta Andraghetti from headquarters. And I would like to address first regarding the determination of a pandemic emergency. As Mary explained, this is the highest possible level of alert to try to trigger action, positive action, as when needed, and not because of the lack of expected response that we experienced with the determination of a fake with the COVID pandemic. Two, regarding the expected benefit that the determination of the pandemic emergency may have, these are also related to the WHO pandemic agreement, because in the WHO pandemic, in the text of the agreement that was adopted by the Assembly in May, there are specific provisions, and one in particular, which is paragraph 6 of Article 12, that upon determination of a pandemic emergency, then contractual arrangements with the vaccine manufacturers would kick in. Then that the key, all the architecture that you see in the amendments of the IHR, fake and pandemic emergency, were thought through to be linked, to be articulated with a specific provision of the pandemic agreement that would actually trigger manufacturing, allocation and distribution of vaccine, therapeutics and diagnostics. Then I had an observation regarding the State Part Implementation Committee and the coordinating financial mechanism. I don't know if I can go there yet or now. I go, okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can go and answer the question as well, Roberta. Also answer the question that was just asked.
Which was about
the issue of equity, solidarity, whether it's an obligation.
Equity and solidarity. Okay, the discussions about equity and solidarity went hand in hand during the negotiations of both the IHR amendments and the WHO pandemic agreement. And they were very, very tense negotiations. And best compromise that countries could negotiate in the setting, in the multilateral setting, was trying to promote, to further equity and solidarity through these two mechanisms. First, the committee, second, the coordinating financial mechanism. This is only a very first step, because if you read carefully the way the two new articles are structured, they are very aspirational, and then the way ahead is still very long. Please, they are not a silver bullet, but they should be these two provisions that are as legally binding and they can be in the context of an international treaty. They represent a first step, sort of laying the foundation. This is where we are, because a group of countries wanted much more, and the other group wasn't ready to give more than that. Then it's really, it will develop, equity and solidarity will depend on how engaged all the parties will be in the IHR implementation committee, in the coordinating financial mechanism, but it will take time. The foundations are there, not a silver bullet. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Any more questions? I do not see. I'm just looking through the chat here, and I do not see any hands up. To the panelists, in case you have any addition, please feel free to step in before we move to the next session, which is basically closing the webinar. Anything you want to clarify? Anything you want to emphasize?
Alan, I wanted to just add on the issue of solidarity and equity. I think this would be the desire of all, especially within the African group, and that was a heavy negotiation around that. Whereas provisions have been put in the pandemic treaty to some extent, as well as in the IHR, I think the implementation will depend on the commitment of the different state parties to the IHR amended and to the pandemic treaty. But I hope that the monitoring committees will keep an eye on this to make it a reality. We saw the disadvantages of lack of this in the COVID-19, and we hope that there will be more commitment to this implementation of these provisions in going forward. Yeah, over from my side, just a small addition.
Alan, I just want to also tell colleagues that those that still have gray areas regarding the NIA and how to establish it, they can reach out to the regional office for guidance, so that they can get a country-specific guidance to look at their context and advise them on the best way forward. Michael has his hand up too.
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. A little reflection on the pandemic emergency vis-a-vis the public health emergency of international concern. If you study the criteria for establishing a FAIC, you may realize some of the processes will lead you to declare a FAIC. But in terms of the gravity, which may be synonymous with pandemic, that will not be there. Hence, just emphasizing why it was so necessary to establish clearly what a pandemic emergency of international concern is, which is somehow a scale above the fake because of the communicable disease aspect. I wanted to add this little reflection on that. Thank you, Lola.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. At some point we lost you, but I'm glad you're back.
Mary
Let's see.
or Roberta, there's a question in the Q&A.
Chat.
Maybe you
Yes.
could
Okay.
take it
What's
up.
the question?
The question is, was there a submission of shortcomings in approaches used to address the last pandemic, or member states are expected to address it through NFP in the context of IHR?
Yes, so all those review committees, actually, the IPPPR, their report is on the website. It's available. They analyze both the strengths, the weaknesses, and some of the recommendations they were providing. For the NFPs, I think I will encourage every NFP. Maybe Dr. Miriam, we share with them the report of the IHR review committee on the functioning of the IHR during the COVID-19 pandemic, because they highlighted quite a lot of gaps and some of the recommendations that they feel will address some of the issues. And this was actually a reoccurring problem. It's almost similar recommendations were presented by the review committee during the Ebola 2024 outbreak. So I think it will be useful for them to have that report to see, the details of the gaps that were identified, because this is global. It's not just limited to AFRO, and also some of the strengths and how to address some of the recommendations that were provided in those reports. I believe it will be helpful.
Yeah.
Roberta, if you have any addition, please.
Yes, I have an addition with respect to one question in the chat regarding the National IHR Authority. Yes, it would be, as Mary said, it would be useful if you have the opportunity to read what was the analysis about the gaps of the NFP experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic and before, as analysis conducted by the review committee that were convened. And two, there is a question whether AFRO is going to support the countries with respect to the National IHR Authority. Colleagues from AFRO, then they have indicated that yes, they will be there to support, but from the WHO headquarters, we are preparing a circular letter highlighting the key actions to be taken by states parties for the implementation of the amendments that will be entering into force on the 19th of September. And the issues that we are going to touch upon include first and foremost the national IHR authorities, because seems to be the most challenging one to be implemented. And then two, we are going to address the amended health documents for conveyances and the International Certificate of Vaccination or Prophylaxis that has been amended. And we are going to flag, for instance, we are going to clarify that, as Miriam said earlier, for the time being, at least for the next 12 months, until the next assembly, the state party annual report will remain unchanged, but we are working on a revision of the state party annual report, and then we are trying, and thank you for raising your concern, because we will try to address from globally in the circular letter that we will be dispatching before the 19th of September. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, finally, and then we conclude.
Yes, I also wanted to, okay, I think I hear.
Please, I think there's interruption. No,
Can
it's
you hear
Paul.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I also wanted to add in response to Kakwan's question, like Roberta said and Dr. Miriam said, there was a lot of contention between major groups of countries during the negotiations. So I think equity and solidarity at this stage are more of guiding principles as opposed to obligations, and hopefully that will change as we go along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have hit the 2-hour mark and we need to conclude. As part of the next steps, please note that there is a survey. We request you to participate in the survey and give us feedback. Your feedback is well taken, usually when we receive it and we improve. But also if you have additional questions that we haven't really answered, please make sure that you send them to us. We shall share with you the necessary materials and presentations that have been done today. But also during our discussions, it's very clear that we shall need to share more of the communication that we had sent earlier out. So we shall share it to our country offices, but also to the member states, such that you can read and get acquainted with the materials. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday, 13th August at 2 p.m. And this will focus on the amendments on border health, POE, shipment and inspection, and sanitation, anything related to points of entry and border health, and this process of domestication. So please get time and make sure that you attend, because it's very important. Before I conclude, I need to thank the panelists. We have some who have been behind the scene and the technical team that has really made this a success. We have Amarachi Abianuru. We have Dr. Miriam, who has been also very supportive, Dr. Stephen Mary, who made the presentation. I'm not forgetting the interpreters. We have Elodie, Paulino, we have Michael, Jerome, we have Roberta, who has been with us. We have Antonio, who is also supported with interpretation. We have Dr. Bukari, Dr. Chamla, Dr. Yoti. We have Guy, Megal, Hamid, Dr. Hamid. We have also other interpreters, Fidel, Donvo, Koku, Pal, Ngam. We have Barua from ECO India and the ECO team, who have really supported the success of this. Thank you very much, and hopefully it has added some value. Like Dr. Mary said, and other panelists, if you need more information, feel free to reach out to the regional office. We're always available, and we shall provide whatever necessary support that is required. Having said that, I want to wish you a nice evening, a nice morning, a nice afternoon, wherever you are, and allow me to bring this webinar to a conclusion. Have a good evening. Over and out.
The survey, please. The post-webinar survey.
Yes, the post-webinar survey has been posted in the group chat, but I think we shall also further circulate it on email for the attention of the participants. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Please don't miss next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.